Alright guys, get this. I've been doing the math, cause I like math. And Aloha Wave, Yang Gang, Bernie Bros, whoever you might be tuning in, whoever you might be rooting for, Trumpers, I don't know. But get this. If the Aloha Wave takes either Iowa or New Hampshire, we win. And by we, I mean a future thriving humanity wins. I've done the math. And get this. Biden is conceding that his campaign doesn't need to take Iowa or New Hampshire or South Carolina or Nevada. It's okay. We've got name recognition. I'm electable. And Warren and Buttigieg are not appealing to any non-white voters. So at that point, the South Carolina firewall, as it were, that everyone keeps talking about, that Biden fans are going to hold strong in South Carolina. I'm sorry, but the main argument I hear to not vote for Tulsi Gabbard is she's less electable than some of these other candidates. That, the DNC will never let that happen. But she's standing up to the DNC, and people are taking notice. When she threatened to boycott debate number 4, millions of Tulsi Gabbers woke up and saw each other on Twitter, liked each other, and followed and found more followers, because unlike Yang Gang and their meme train that just easily can produce an account that has 3,000 followers that is less than a month old, Tulsi Gabbin is hard work. You have to climb uphill, up Smear Mountain against trolls all dang day. But the good news is that after eating trolls for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day basically for the last several months, I've now gotten pretty good at predicting what they're gonna say. And let me tell you, nothing makes a troll's gears really start to spin out and churn than the phrase, "and don't tell me," followed by the argument that they were going to use to, might I add, straw man, facile, nonsense argument that is sort of a red herring and not related to the argument that you're trying to make, that they were going to use. When you throw it back at them and say that is not a legitimate argument to make in this case, they'll say, I wasn't going to say that. You're... You break their code. And so get this. Yang supports UBI. Tulsi also supports UBI. Bernie supports Medicare for all. Tulsi also supports single-payer Medicare for all. If you want both single-payer Medicare for all and UBI, and you don't want to vote for a UBI guy that wants to reunify the press and ignores Kyle Chillers in all 169 of his policies, I might add, and even when pressed to ask what he'll do about big tech censorship, says, "I'll make you shareholders of your data," but says nothing about what we actually do to censorship, because making me a shareholder of my censored voice doesn't really help me. And giving the big tech companies the opportunity to nominate a board to get Americans agreeing on facts again and reunify the press is not what Americans should vote for in 2020. If the Jeff Steen spider thing was a big deal to you, if you don't want to hear about, or worse, not hear about, tons and tons and tons of kids getting traded like cattle, you need to vote for someone who's not going to reunify the press, because the press doesn't reunify around exposing vile, horrible people. And instead of doing the humane thing and making a statement denouncing evil, instead of changing your policy to not want to have an authoritarian press monger, the Yang Gang blows their money on paying people to fight me on Twitter. It's seemingly professionally. They have as much time as I do, and I am virtually an unemployed online tutor, so I can kick as much butt as I need to kick. Bottom line, it's the same people who've been, heading me off at the pass whenever I try to inform uninformed voters about places where their candidate could improve so that they can improve their candidate. I even say things like, I will donate $80 to Yang the day that he changes this policy. And I get mounded on by trolls who want to distract from my message. And I've gotten really good at just bringing it back to that message and bashing them in the face until they just leave me alone. And at this point, I've started to gain followers from doing this, and I'm turning it into a channel about doing this. So bottom line, it is starting to really damage Yang's campaign keeping silent about the kid herders. And if it's hurting you, if it's losing you votes, if it's making it so that you're now running out of money from all the people that you're hiring to head me off, to not make a statement that says, of course we're going to stop people who do vile acts, and not make it so that giving $1,000 a month to every single person just makes them go gangbusters because they trade in people. Clearly there might be a problem there. Just pointing that out. But bottom line, anybody who wants a UBI will vote for a UBI, right? So Tulsi's got that vote when Yang crumbles, or until Yang makes a better statement on that stuff, or because she's more willing to speak out about many, many things and isn't basically silent on what her foreign policy is entirely. Anyway, when the South Carolina Biden firewall falls, what happens? Some of those voters go to Bernie, but Tulsi, I've been hearing things like from, New Hampshire soccer moms saying, I drove my son to a soccer game and I saw a bunch of Tulsi yard signs and no one else. New Hampshire's her best state. If she wins one state, after that, we go to South Carolina, where the Biden firewall is looking at it going, oh, we've taken a lot of hits. We haven't won any of the first 3 primaries. Will you guys please vote for me? And the minority vote traditionally has gone for Bernie, aside from Biden. But Tulsi was the samurai that slayed Kamala Harris. And I know she's on a lot of people's radar. She's the only one that is trying to actually get people to talk honestly about our racial tensions and divides, and try to promote, aloha, compassion, assertive aloha, I might add. She is calling out the school bully on the virtual playground anytime someone is saying things that are divisive and not productive towards making people more, better communicators and more compassionate. I mean, she's really getting after it. People sometimes take offense to the way that she promotes her aloha message because, well, you can't be agreeing with Obama and Ellen DeGeneres. And it's like, she's not excusing their behavior. She's saying that their message of, non-divisive compassion is needed right now. She clearly, very clearly is willing to call out warmongers for being warmongers. # Queen of the Warmongers. But I've been spreading not a hashtag, but sort of a retweet where I just say, give credit where credit is due. And it'll be maybe a Trump tweet, or it'll be a good example was, you can say there was someone who said, you can say what you want about Donald Trump, but Hillary Clinton would have embroiled us in more war on the world stage, something. And I said, yeah, give credit where credit is due. Hillary Clinton has admitted on her own, from her own tweets in plain English, that if she were president in her world, in her America, the world would be embroiled in 3 more wars than they are currently right now. So to me, I say we kind of dodged a bullet. I mean, Orange Band might be pretty bad, but we had some pretty bad options in 2016. Quite frankly, that was because they denied us having a good option in Bernie Sanders. You may think he's a crazy socialist and not a good option, but again, that's why we should go with Tulsi Gabbard, because no one thinks she's a crazy socialist. They think she's an assertive aloha patriot who is going to, bring costs down by responsibly going after every single corruption nest in this country. And they recognize that if she makes it up crap smear mountain with all the smears that they are throwing her way, she'll be beholden to nobody but the American people. And that's a pretty liberating thing once you realize it. So, if she takes New Hampshire, or even does really pretty okay in Iowa, that Joe Biden firewall that was looking at Bernie is going to be looking at Tulsi and saying, well, she's just Bernie but better. I mean, let's be honest. Oh, perfect. I got it right here. Let's be honest. We can see right here. Bernie's pretty good. He's got some really good domestic policies. But Tulsi's just better in almost every department. The one thing Bernie has going for him that Tulsi doesn't is the universal housing thing. And I'm sure if and when you can figure out how to do it in a way that you're not going to make either rent controls go nuts. I mean, the thing I like about Bernie's universal housing plan is that it makes it so that landlords are forced to, not exploit being crappy landlords and will, I'll raise the rent if you make me fix that type stuff. Universalizing the way landlords have to treat their tenants is really cool. But I think instead of going for universal housing, we should go for universal home ownership, We should make the goal having as many, make it so that people have to rent to own. How about that? Make it so that once someone has earned, say, 8 times what they paid to build their apartment building, or once someone has, paid rent in equivalent to, say, 1.5 times what that would cost as a condo, they own their apartment. If they stay in one apartment for 12 years, it's just like home ownership, because quite frankly, having more people in our economy that don't have to pay rent all the time makes our economy more stable. It means that we don't have more than a third of what everybody earns going right back into the cost of living and putting a roof over your head. It's a bonkers way to design a country, quite frankly. It's only profitable for the people who own the land. And making more Americans landowners is a really good way to combat that. So I'd say universal rent to own clauses that can't be sort of manipulated by kicking people out at the, if it's 7 years at the 6, that would be too short. Say if it's 12 years at the, 11-year mark, be like, well, you're just partying too loud, get out. No, sorry, no. But like realistically, Tulsi always does everything, humanity first, whatever makes moral sense. I've been arguing with Yang trolls about Tulsi a lot lately about UBI, because she doesn't have a UBI policy posted yet. Where's your UBI policy, bro? And it's like, you know what? I know what her UBI policy is going to be, because it is always humanity first, and she always does the research before coming out with a policy. She's going to do UBI, and she's going to do it right. And that means she's going to make sure that every single person gets an extra $1,000 a month added to their income. Not everybody who is a middle-class American, a CEO, or, fully employed, but not people who make get a small amount given to them to pay for food by the state government. Everybody. Because let's look at this. UBI is way better than food stamps. UBI is way better than pretty much any other program. Don't get me wrong. It's an awesome idea. I'm not trying to campaign against UBI. Let's have UBI. But let's think about this for a second. If Yang's UBI says, I get $1,000 a month, my mom gets $1,000 a month, my brother gets $1,000 a month, my neighbor gets $1,000 a month, the CEO gets $1,000 a month, you get $1,000 a month, but my friends and your friends that are on food stamps get $1,000 a month, but they lose what they currently have at around, $150 a month? How does that make humanity first math sense? I mean, granted, food stamps are an awkward and cumbersome program that, keep people from being able to be employed better in some cases right now. It is definitely not nearly as good of a program as UBI. I'm not trying to suggest that food stamps should stay and UBI should not. I'm suggesting that for people like, say, a single mom with 3 kids under 18 who don't collect their own UBI yet, food stamps might make a huge difference, and being able to stack that on top of UBI, if you need food for any reason, being able to get extra help to pay for food for any reason is humanity first. And when food stamps cost about 1% of what a UBI costs right now, and you can imagine there are a lot of people who, when they got a UBI, would no longer want or need food stamps, and you can imagine that people who currently try to scam food stamps to make, 50% of what they are worth in terms of cash back to go buy drugs or whatever, they're going to go right out the window, because, who's going to bother with that when you're getting $1,000 a month? There might be some food stamp fraud, but let's be honest, most of the people would rather, do things that don't require jumping through the hoops and getting signed up for food, all that sort of stuff, right? The people who say, I'm already getting $1,000 a month, but yeah, absolutely need that extra 120 or that 120 plus, for each of my kids, whatever you qualify for. There are some people in this country that makes a huge difference. And when it costs a fraction of 1% of UBI to ensure that literally no American goes hungry, that's humanity first. That's why I know that that's the UBI Tulsi is going to champion. I am confident in my bones. And I will bet anyone out there, I probably shouldn't actually say this because y'all will be saying, well, she didn't. But realistically, I would feel confident betting someone $1,000 that I really can't afford to bet right now, that's what she's going to do, because that's humanity first, and she's always motivated by what's compassionate, what makes sense. And you want to tell me that it's harder to pass that bill of UBI through Congress than Yang's version where we cut food stamps? How popular has it ever been for any congressman to try to cut food stamps? How popular do you think it's going to be for some congressman to try to stand against the bill that will ensure that literally no American goes hungry? And when it costs less than 1% of your UBI bill that you're already saying we need, that, Silicon Valley has conveniently been pumping out tons and tons of articles since January 2016 saying it's the age of the UBI, we need a UBI, we need it now, we need it yesterday, automation is coming and y'all should be scared, so vote for our candidate that wants to reunify the press and doesn't want to free Assange and doesn't talk about censorship or Kyle Chillers and all 169 of his policies. What? Oh, excuse me. He's had a very corporate upbringing. He's been in every single industry that you could not want a candidate to be. He's worked in pharma, he's worked in Wall Street, he taught bankers how to make more money off of us. He works with the people who want to privatize our public education, and they helped him fund Venture for America, which got him the stepping stone to a year later become a presidential ambassador for change, and 3 years after that to become the presidential ambassador for global entrepreneurship. Andrew Yang was the White House presidential ambassador for global entrepreneurship. Global entrepreneurship. Global entrepreneurship. Globalism. Let's be real. I read his book. He admits that his program, Venture for America, probably destroyed more jobs than he made. His goal was to make 100,000 jobs in 14 years. A lofty goal that realistically sounds like total BS when you start to realize that he created 2,800 jobs in 7 years. Less than 3% of his 14-year goal in 50% of the time. And after 1 year, he became the presidential ambassador for change. So it sounds to me like they weren't nearly as interested in how well his job company actually created jobs as they were in giving him a propped up resume and or creating companies, creating places that own more parts of, doing this thing, this globalist, capitalist acquirement program that we tend to do. I mean, he admits they destroyed more jobs than they made through automation and optimization. That says to me he created an entrepreneurship program where we take kids out of Yale and wherever and say, hey, will you make an agency company for us in that town over there so that we can, have more control of the resources that town produces? It's the same thing that we try to do in these other countries where we bomb them and then sell them their own electricity, their own resources, and their own companies to be employed at back. It's very apparent to me. It's very apparent when you read Andrew Yang's book with eyes to see that he is a scary, scary candidate. And the fact that after, at this point, I think 7 months of campaigning against him very vocally on Twitter, I'm starting to get a following. I'm starting to really be able to get these trolls to be drowned out, sometimes by my voice alone, sometimes by friends who will chime in with me. I'm getting several Yang Gangers to pick up the cause and start pressuring him about this. And he's continued to be silent. And the longer that lasts, the more conspicuous and ominous that silence becomes. I've sent the campaign 7 emails and gotten a couple of responses where they send me back things saying things like, we're going to make you shareholders of your data. I've had a couple people on Twitter send me a link to a human rights Amnesty International Q&A where he responds to a question about human rights abuses abroad, saying we won't partner with companies that engage in human rights violations, and it's not companies that engage in the human rights violations that we're talking about here. I mean, it might be, but they're not, human rights violating companies, if you know what I'm saying. I'm getting a little sidetracked here, but bottom line is if you want a UBI, you're going to vote for a UBI. If you want Medicare for all, you're going to vote for single-payer Medicare for all. And Tulsi only needs to win New Hampshire for people to realize that they can have all of that and end war and world poverty as well, and usher in a green energy economy. Not a carbon tax and inefficient energy technologies to get us sustainable by 2050. 2050, every single Democrat on that stage says sustainable by 2050 because 2050 is long enough that some crazy Republican can come in later and reverse it or whatever. And a carbon tax is actually, while it may sound good to some of you, is counterproductive for addressing climate change. Let's look at what a carbon tax does. Now, you can say what you will about carbon is bad, but the fact of the matter is, the people that are going to be taxed from a carbon tax are the people who live in rural areas who might, try to live sustainably and, make organic farms that could be then bought out by big agro-business when that family has to close up shop and leave because they can't afford gas anymore, are the people who have to commute really far to work in big cities because they can't afford to live in the big city where the CEO lives. Those are the people who pay a lot when we tax carbon. And the people who make pollution, not carbon, pollution, because pollution is a lot more complicated than carbon, and carbon, if we want to address carbon, all we need to do is plant more trees. I mean, it is a little more complicated than that, but bottom line, we should be addressing all the trees we chop down if we want to address carbon. But that's another issue. Bottom line, pollution, 100 companies produce somewhere between, I've heard numbers between 50 and 80% of the pollutants that are killing our coral reefs, that are making, fish hatcheries die, besides overfishing, that's another problem too, that are making our oils, or our whales fill up with little plastic bits that should be krill, that are, between 50 and 80% of global pollutants are made by 100 companies. I don't really need to say any more than that. You know what all it's doing. We are monocropping our country, or our world, into a global dust bowl and calling it a natural extinction of overpopulation. It's not overpopulation, it's misuse of our resources. We can use more sustainable farming techniques and have fewer areas end up going fallow because we we grow nothing but corn and then we turn that corn into fuel, when instead of using fuel, we could have motors that are just powering everything forever. Ethanol is such a waste. We are turning food that people could desperately use into fuel. But more importantly, why are we growing so much corn when corn is destroying our soil? Grow things that grow well with corn at the very least, but ideally grow some other things that make for better food, that produce better nutritional content and value for the people who eat them. Carbon tax. Sorry guys, got a little sidetracked there. Carbon tax. So, I went into sustainable restoration, and that's something that I've really only heard two candidates talking about, and that's Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard. And I only heard Andrew Yang talking about it because he's the data-driven candidate, so after he heard Tulsi talk about it a few times and realized that that's the best answer for climate change that we could give without actually giving a better answer for climate change, we're going to try to, steal some of her talking points over there, but keep our fundamental idea the same. Carbon tax, sustainable by 2050 using wind, solar, geothermal, and nuclear. That is every single Democrat on that stage's plan except Tulsi Gabbard. Now, what a carbon tax does is it makes it so that it is more expensive to produce things in America. Now that means that companies that are going to want to produce things as cheaply as possible, in some cases will move to other parts of the world where it is cheaper to produce, where they don't take climate things into concern. And you can say what you will about our government being corrupt and, Trump defunding the EPA and all this and that. I know. But there are, in fact, countries in this world that take climate and environment even less into concern than we do, like China and the coal plants, both operating in China and the ones that they are selling to Africa because it is the cheapest way to give them access to energy. And China is absolutely willing to do that, and we're not willing to do anything. So bottom line, when we tax our carbon, we move more production into people that are destroying our planet more effectively than we are. So instead of taxing carbon, let's make more things sustainably here, and let's end fossil fuel subsidies, end fracking, end offshore drilling, and start producing motors that can power a home indefinitely. Indefinitely. Size of a toaster. For the world. The ex-Canadian Prime Minister of Defense, Paul Hellyer, suggests that there is technology in this world that could give every single person access to electricity within 7 years if America decided to convert all of our war-making apparatus into peacemaking, energy engine making infrastructure. He thinks 7 years would be long enough to get the world access to electricity with this technology. And Tulsi Gabbard's climate plan says by 2027, 80% sustainable energy. Doesn't say anything about carbon tax. Clean energy economy. And that 80%, that last 20%, do you know what that's for? That is because Tulsi Gabbard always thinks compassion first, humanity first, and recognizes that if we go 100%, even though we could potentially, that 80% is to make sure that the 20% of Americans that can't afford to transition quickly, can't afford to buy the newest technology, or are wary of it for whatever reason, have the freedom to adopt at their leisure and can continue to do whatever they want until then. But that we are going to make a goal of getting everyone access to their own limitless electricity. Green energy economy. 2050 is way too late. And that's why they don't like her. If that sounds too crazy and amazing, stupendous to believe, I urge you to consider. You know, they'd make so much money off of something like that, right? The oil companies, right? They're the ones that own the patents on these motors. And the reason, I mean, I've seen them. I have seen these patents. You can't tell me that's a conspiracy. That is fact. That is white papers that I personally have pored over and read through. That is, you know, motors that I've even seen a few of them on YouTube, as well as, you know, documentaries of people who've, the same technology has been recreated on 2 different continents in 3 different decades to create a car that doesn't need fuel besides a little bit of water. And you can use pretty much any water you want, which is even cooler. But that's, again, getting a little sidetracked. Bottom line is, just because you haven't seen the evidence, just because people aren't talking about the evidence because they're paid not to talk about the evidence, does not mean you cannot find, does not mean that there is not evidence for such things existing. And I urge you to consider, to really step outside of what you've been told and what you are thinking right now, what you're trying to tell me through your computer screen, even though I won't listen because I'm just sitting here talking to a camera, and consider this. The oil companies have always stood in the way of us making energy more efficiently. They have hamstrung our nuclear energy program at every turn. We spent $3 billion to make Yucca Mountain in Utah. And then one of the senators that made Obama president, that one of the major people that was instrumental in funding his campaign, well, the Utah senator said, hey, Nevada, wherever Yucca Mountain is, you can Google it, Yucca Mountain. It is a bunker that was meant to dispose of all of our nuclear waste. You know, we surveyed our country and found the one perfect spot where there was a watershed, where we couldn't, you know, there wasn't any earthquakes, there wasn't anything that could possibly make this bunker get destroyed. We put steel in it, we put concrete in it, we made this thing bomb-proof, bulletproof, everything. And it was just like, this is the place where we'll let all of our nuclear waste just sit and decay. Because we need something for that. Because right now our nuclear waste is just one tsunami, earthquake, whatever, away from making our entire east or west coast basically uninhabitable. So we should probably be taking care of our nuclear waste better than we are. But the Utah, Nevada, whatever senator who was instrumental in getting Obama elected president, when Obama became president, said, hey, Barack, buddy, can you make it, you know, can you just ban the use of Yucca Mountain for us real quick? We don't want to let people have efficient, you know, make nuclear technology less dangerous. We don't want to make it more appealing to people. We don't want to take care of our waste and stop giving people cancer. Because we make money off cancer too. Don't forget that. Like, come on, Barack. We need your help on this one here. We want everyone in America getting cancer, not a mountain in the desert that no one lives in. So, and you gotta wonder what else they did with that mountain when they shut it down and didn't use it for all of our nuclear waste. They're probably looking at that and going, this is a pretty nice bunker. It'd be a shame to put all that waste in it and not use it for something cooler. If you know anything about Jeff the Spider, you know what I'm talking about when I say something cooler. It's not actually cooler at all, but that is another much, much darker topic, and you can find that on plenty of channels that aren't this one, because I don't want to scare people who are just starting out. Bottom line is, this technology that could give people limitless energy would be a huge cut in profits for these companies that own the patents and that have always profited off of slowing our progress in, human scientific technology. And when you consider this motor would effectively amount to they sell everyone one motor once, and then everyone has access to power forever, and they can no longer profit off of selling us access to electricity, although they could sell us access to the internet, I suppose, in various forms, or data in various forms, and they can't profit off of going to war over energy anymore. You can understand, 1, why Tulsi Gabbard likes this idea, 2, why they don't like Tulsi Gabbard, and 3, why they would not want to roll out this motor. Because, yeah, they could make a lot of money off of rolling out a motor that can power your home forever. That's a very useful tool. But only once. And whenever that technology gets out, because right now the way it works is if an independent entrepreneur starts to make one of these motors, they will swoop in and be their investor and then get them embroiled in some fraud, or they will buy the patent from them. Like, there are various techniques that I've researched that they will use to keep this technology from coming out in our country. And, world's a big place. There are a lot of countries where this technology could come out, right? At the same time, 1, it wouldn't be that hard to keep Americans from hearing about it. We have a very controlled press. Russia's very controlled. China's very controlled. Australia's very controlled. France is very controlled. Like, realistically, all of these countries have very strong globalist oil lobby type interests in them that like to traffic in, people that are this tall. Anyway, bottom line, there's one person who's standing up to him. There's one person who's going to make it happen. And if and when such motors were to get out on the world stage and it got to a point where you really couldn't stop Americans from hearing about it, because at a certain point, yeah, we'll hear about it, and maybe some people will even go out and buy some experimental motors. But they've thought of that to a certain degree. They've produced a bunch of fake websites from people who do make sort of junk motors, and you can kind of tell that they're junk because, I don't know, if you start to sniff through news and media and stuff long enough, you get a bullshit detector that's pretty strong. But bottom line, I haven't, personally found the miracle motor that powers my home's still on the grid. Don't get me wrong. I don't personally have one of these things because I recognize the difficulty in actually getting one, because I think any company that was significantly successfully selling them is probably not going to last very long before they get embroiled in some sort of fraud, or the owners disappear, or, there's a lot of legal or less than legal ways to make something like that not sort of tip and take off, as it were. And if it did, if you ever got to the point where it was like, word got out, like, did you hear there's some dude in India, or some dude here, or some dude in Africa, or some dude in the Middle East? I think there's one in all 3 probably 4 of those places, and Australia, we'll throw that all in there. There's probably people in all of those places that are using these motors. But if word finally got out that these were a real thing, that people were using in mass, that there was some dude's shop who could, retrofit your car to become an infinite driving machine that you could then plug into your home and power your home with, those oil companies could just make that machine. They already have the patents for it. Oh, that's one of the ways that they definitely keep it from getting out. They say, we already have a patent on that. You're infringing on our technology, and you're going to need to go to court with us now before you can continue to use your company, and we'll probably throw you in jail, and then you'll accidentally get shivved, and oops, wouldn't that be horrible and tragic? These sort of things. And one of these guys actually had over 300 signed affidavits of people who had seen this water-powered car. So it's not as though having documented visual, digital, whatever evidence is enough, because we've got Reunify the press mongers in Silicon Valley that are really good at scrubbing things off of YouTube and Facebook and the various things. Not that you can't see them, but you can't refer back to them. You can't link them to people, and they don't. They get there are entire news agencies that are banned off of Facebook. That kind of says it all, right? But if this thing did start to pop and people were aware that these motors existed, these oil companies would just sell them to us and make the profit, because as we've all said, having such a miracle motor is going to almost certainly make a lot of money, right? So there you go. They've got no incentive to do it with any sort of expediency, and every incentive to slow down that process, because they profit off of a lot of things until then. And kind of the game's up once that happens, because once the news is out worldwide that you can just go over to wherever and throw down, you know, it doesn't even matter what amount of money it is, some, you know, not significant amount of money, just, you know, a reasonable amount of money for a motor that we can build, right? Once we know how to do it, we optimize it, we're humans, we're good at that, and, you know, $80, I don't know, whatever it could actually, I mean, I'm not talking about how much you sell it for in America, because, you know, startup costs, you want to make sure that you can keep it going, and, you know, but like realistically what it actually costs to make / what it costs to get to the free, or to the, you know, the third world, probably $80 realistically. How much does it ever cost to make something? So, you know, the jig is kind of up once the word gets out on that. All they really have is delay, 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 and deny the truth. Tulsi's the truth. 80% sustainable by 2027. That is the best climate policy on that stage. And that is why people like Byrne keep saying, I have the most detailed climate policy that goes further than any other candidate in this primary. Because they need to cover up the fact that that's just not true. If people knew who had the most progressive climate policy and what she was actually repping, and what Byrne's not repping, and also Byrne's horrible voting record on war and terror, let's be honest, he voted for Afghanistan, Iraq 1, covert operations in Syria that led to our current situation, and bombings in Gaza and Serbia. So he's literally voted for war and terror. Senator Sanders, I'm sorry, but I understand what you had to do in order to stay in Congress for that long, and you probably did that as a tactical decision to, you know, affect economic change. But the bottom line is, you were the best option in 2016, you are no longer the best option in 2020, and I can bittersweetly say, mostly sweetly say, that we would be settling if we had Bernie Sanders as our nomination in 2020. But I think that's about it. Thanks for gabbing Aloha America, my dudes. If you like this, please like and share. Tune in for my other videos. Don't let them skeptical skexies steal your essence, my dudes. And feel free to tweet at me at Demservative on Twitter. And share with me what you think, any ideas you want me to cover, or just keep tuning in and sharing with your friends. Alright, later, Gators.